Hello. So yesterday's lesson was all about the characteristics of a healthy relationship and the warning signs or kind of the red flags of unhealthy relationships. So now that we are familiar with those traits and qualities, now we're going to talk about healthy communication. And these are some of the most important things that you're going to use throughout not only in the next few years, but your entire life. So listen close. This is good stuff. So your EQ for the day is what are the important qualities of healthy communication? And then your learning target is I can understand the keys to effective communication. So this communication, what we're going to learn here is can be used for any kind of relationship, but these tips are basically for a relationship with a boyfriend or a girlfriend, or in the future, maybe your spouse. All right, so keys to remember. Communication, healthy communication is always a two-way street. Both people have to be equally involved in the conversations, and these tips will help you talk through your differences because we always don't agree with everything our partners say, and we should be able to do this while feeling safe, respected, and heard. So tips for effective and healthy communication. So this is a review because we did learn about this earlier in the year, but just a reminder that we should be using I statements instead of like you statements. For example, they give here says, I feel upset when you do whatever that's upsetting you, instead of saying something like, you're making me upset. So you want to try to stay away from blaming other people because once they hear you, their ears and their mind just kind of shut down. So try to stick as much as to the I statements as much as you can. And sometimes when we're angry, these are hard to remember to do. So that's why it's a good thing to practice these and refresh your memory every once in a while. All right, next one is don't push your feelings aside. Bring up things that bother you early on so they don't build up and become bigger problems in the future. Next one is be clear and direct. Clearly state what's on your mind. Tell the person exactly what you feel, what you think, and what you need from them. Don't be passive aggressive. Don't talk about these things behind their back. Be clear and direct to their face. Most importantly, build trust. Unless you have a reason not to trust somebody, assume that they are telling you the truth at all times, and that is a great way to start building trust with another person. And of course, if you're not sure or you don't understand something, ask questions. Don't just assume what they're thinking. A few more tips for healthy communication. Always talk in person. Or if you have to, if you're far away, maybe through a video chat. But never talk about issues over the text message or email because as we know, we cannot interpret all messages in written form properly. So always talk face to face if possible. Doing this over text or email will only create further problems. Be willing to apologize. That's always important. If you make a mistake, don't be afraid to say you're sorry. That can go a long way to building a healthy, trusting relationship. And of course, this one, don't yell. And like I said earlier, sometimes when we're really angry with somebody, we sometimes lose our cool. So never yell. That's not going to get you anywhere. If you're really that upset, before you have a conversation, take a break to cool off so you don't cause further problems. All right, so those are the tips for healthy communication, and these things work with all relationships, not just romantic relationships. So now we're going to talk more about the romantic relationship type of things. So this is how to say no to sex. These are some really, really good tips. You may use these sometime in your future, probably more than once. So how do we properly say no? It sounds like an easy thing to do, but it's not always that easy. Because in reality, you might feel pressured, you might feel guilty, because you might really like the other person. The person might be manipulating you. So those are things to keep in mind. And remember, pressuring someone into having sex is never, I repeat, never, ever okay. You deserve to have your boundaries respected. Next one, you have the right to decide for yourself when you're ready for sex, and to say no to sex at any time with any person for any reason, even if you've already have done it in the past. Next, saying no to sex can be very, very hard, especially if you haven't thought about what you're going to say beforehand. So this is a great time in your life to start practicing, start making up your mind and your decisions why you would like to say no. Next one is sex is all about consent. If you don't want to have sex, let your partner know. And then we're going to learn more about that in the next slide. And then it's always important to remember this. If your boyfriend or girlfriend pressures you or threatens to break up with you because you don't want to have sex or do anything else that you don't want to do, it's a very unhealthy relationship, and it's time to put your tennis shoes on and run. Run away as fast as you can. It's never going to get better. Here's some more tips on saying no, because it's not always as easy as these words are making it seem. But when you're talking to the other person, be confident. Make sure you know what you want before the situation arises. So think things through, have your plan, maybe even share it with somebody, your best friend or your parents, so you can practice and you're determined that you're going to stick to your decision. Say no, say no, say no. You don't owe anyone, even the person you really, really like or love, an explanation for some things you don't want to do. There's no reason to explain. If you want to, you can, but you certainly don't have to. Next one, tell them what you do want. Maybe your limits at this age is just kissing. Maybe not even that. So maybe you can, if someone's pressuring you, could say, besides the other things, saying no, let's do this instead. Watching a movie, going out to eat, kissing, holding hands, whatever it may be. Number 4, be clear and direct. Look them in the eyes, good body language, use a serious tone in your voice. All those things are great examples of any kind of good communication. And then the last one, you can also let them know that you really, really like them or maybe love them, but you're just not ready for the sex. So those are some good tips on saying no to sex, or really anything else you don't want to do. All right, we're going to watch this video. So what is consent? What does this really mean? So tune in.
Consent is a pretty simple concept. Say you want to make plans with a friend. Like invite them over to your house, take them to a movie, or go for ice cream. Before you can do this, you need to check to make sure they're cool with it, right? Same goes for sex. Before you start any sexual activity with someone, you need to make sure they understand and agree to participate in that sexual activity. Sexual activity includes kissing, touching, and sexual intercourse of any kind. So, what does consent look like? Consent is asking the other person for permission before you start any sexual activity. Consent is a verbal, voluntary yes, with everyone agreeing to the activity. And consent is done in person before the act and part of an ongoing conversation. Consent can also depend on how old you and the other person are. So take a moment to read this chart and make sure you understand the close-in age consent laws and how they apply to each group. It's also important to know if someone is drunk, high, or asleep, they cannot give consent. Pressuring someone into sexual activity does not mean you have consent. And not hearing a no does not mean you have consent. Be sure to pay attention to body language. Even if the other person verbally says yes, if their body language says no, you do not have consent. So how do you get consent? You ask for it. You say, "Is this okay with you?" Or, "Do you want to do this?" It might feel a bit awkward, but it's important to respect the other person's boundaries. Always ask for consent and always respect the answer. And how do you give consent? You clearly agree by saying yes or using another positive statement like, "Sure, let's do this." So remember, yes means consent. And it's always okay to say no. You can also change your mind at any time. So even if you say yes, if at any point you start to feel uncomfortable, you can withdraw consent and say no. And no always means no. Sex without consent is sexual assault, and that is not cool. But communicating with the other person every time you take part in sexual activity and every time you change the type of sexual activity is cool. So always ask the question. Keep asking the question and respect the answer. And always make sure you and the other person both understand and agree to what you're doing. If you have any other questions about consent, be sure to talk to your parent, teacher, or a trusted adult.
Okay, that is good to know information. So, where is that? So, in summary, when we're talking about consent, hold on a second. How do I get out of this? Exit. So, consent is freely given. Come on. It's freely given. It's not never okay to pressure, trick, or threaten someone into saying yes. And like the lady in the video said, it's if a person's drunk, high, or asleep, they are not able to give consent. It is reversible. Even if you said okay once, doesn't mean you have to say okay every time. You must be fully informed of everything around the situation in order to give consent. And then be specific. What are you saying yes and no to? And finally, when I was in college, I had a professor named Mr. Bruno Walensky, and I had an entire 18-week semester class on sex ed. And this Bruno Walensky ended every single lecture every day with this quote. So it's burnt into my brain. I love it because it's so true. Trust is a must, or the relationship is a bust. So always, always remember that. If you can't trust the person you're with, that relationship will never, ever work out. Trust is a must, or the relationship is a bust. All right, thank you for listening. And once again, if you have any questions, please let a trusted adult, like your parent, like your health teacher, or the counselor know.